When a team comes together the way that ours did, the first 20 games, if you look historically, we kind of expected that to be a little choppy. We expected our team to shoot the ball a little bit better. Obviously, defensively, we were really consistent and pretty good through the first 20. And then from there, historically, that starts to kind of trend forward. You start to work out some kinks. And once we got into January, I really felt like we were playing at an elite level on both sides of the ball and playing with rhythm. And I thought we were at a really, really high level and balanced. Clearly, the reality of the situation is, once we took the injury to Robertson, it was really disrupting to us. It disrupted the progress we made. With all that being said, the real key to the season in the regular season, in my opinion, was just the amount of time it took us to respond and adjust to the loss of him. And therein lies the fact that, we have to own that. We didn't do a good enough job with that. I didn't think that, from that point on, we found ourselves. And I felt like, once that happened and the amount of time it took for us to adapt, we kind of shifted from kind of the regular approach of like pursuing progress, trying to build habits and getting better, to really becoming a little more outcome oriented, just trying to find a way to win the next game. And I personally feel like that really caught up with us down the stretch and ultimately in the playoffs. And we have to own that. I'm happy to say that, we're sitting here in year 10 in Oklahoma City with 48 wins, a team that was one of 3 or 4 teams to be in the top 10 in offense and defense, the 7th best net rating in the league, the 9th best record, and we're disappointed. And we should be. We expected more out of the team. I think universally, and I'm speaking more internally, I've sat up here for 10 years. This is my 10th time I've sat it in front of you, and I felt really good about the performance of the team and the opportunity to capture the opportunity during the regular season and to hopefully put us in position to make deep playoff runs. And I don't feel like we were at that level this year, and that's on us, and we've got to figure out ways going forward because, as I said earlier, there's a lot of positives to what we were able to do, but the inconsistency of the performance is something that, clearly our team has to figure out. And I'm really optimistic that we'll be able to do that because when I think about the season, I never felt that when we were performing against the upper echelon teams in the league, I felt like we would always perform at a high level, and I thought we matched up well, especially when we were fully healthy, but, injuries are part of the deal. But it's our responsibility to adapt to those. But I thought our problems were inconsistency against some of the sub-500 teams, and that inability to build habits through that period of time really caught up with us. Let me move on to a couple other things. So with respect to Billy, one of the things that I'm most excited about and excited for him about going forward is the fact that, if fortunate enough, he'll be able to work with the same core of a team that, as I said before, has a baseline that we've established, but has some controllable areas that need to improve. If you think about the last 3 years for our organization and the last 3 years for him, it's been a little bit of a whipsaw in respect to just the team he inherited in 2016, the performance of that team being within a couple minutes of going to the finals, and then not being able to capitalize on that. Obviously, on the heels of free agency in 2016, we're trying to put together a team on the fly and do the best that we can. We're able to get that team to the postseason, and then in his third year, there's a significantly different roster again. I think the best thing for him, and I think the biggest opportunity for him, is in the continuity. Additionally, just continuity in general with the type of team that we have assembled and the way it was assembled historically. Continuity is its best friend going forward, and that's just empirically proven out. And obviously, we've spent a lot of time studying that. So the addition of Dre, returning, and then hopefully, if we're able to bring the whole team back together, the rhythm and the continuity of the roles that have been established should be really important to our improvement. With respect to Paul George, I know you guys should probably, if you're doing your jobs, have plenty of questions on that. And thing I'd like to say about that with respect to Paul is I feel like he's been here a little like longer than 1 year. And I think, and I said this to him before he left, the reason why is because I just feel like he's such a tremendous fit for our organization, our community, the way he has embraced the opportunity in Oklahoma City, built strong relationships both with his teammates, with ownership, with staff. I just think he's really, really been exceptional in that respect. On the floor, you know, I thought that during that 2 or 3 month stretch where he was shooting the ball like that, I thought he was the best player in the league. And he's an even better defender than we realized. And as I said before, with Dre and Paul on the floor on the wings, I think we're holding teams to some ridiculous, like I want to say it's like 95 points per 100 possessions or something along those lines. And it was just devastating, and that was really what we were excited about, you know, when we got PG. With respect to, you know, his future, this is what I can tell you. You know, from the day that he arrived, we really made a specific and intentional effort to build a relationship with Paul and his representation built on 3 things: collaboration, transparency, and trust. And those tenets were followed throughout the year and continued to be. I feel really strongly about the relationship. I feel great about the communication and the honesty because of the way we started the relationship. And, you know, the fact that PG is extension eligible based on the way his contract is set up, and obviously it doesn't make a lot of sense economically for him to look at that. And we obviously can't have any conversations with respect to a new contract until July, and obviously haven't done that. But it opens up opportunity to have conversation about the team, about the future, non-economic, about the opportunity to build something, the opportunity to hear his thoughts on working to continue to enhance the relationship on and off the floor with Westbrook, which I think has been a really joy to watch those 2 guys work together and learn each other, especially off the floor. To be honest with you, they've really become close. And the opportunity to look into that and then also have that dialogue has really encouraged us. It's made us feel good about you know, where he is in his mind about the Thunder, where he is with his approach to things. And again, we're looking forward to the opportunity in July to have you know, a more official conversation and one that can be more specific with respect to a deal. But that window was beneficial for us, I would say that. And I really want to commend the all parties for the transparency of those conversations and the relationships that have been built. Let me talk a little bit about Carmelo. I know that I'll have plenty of questions about him. I just want to be clear about one thing with respect to Carmelo. I don't want his comments at the end of the season to in any way be reshaped by anybody to insinuate that he wasn't a total pro during the season. I don't want that to be insinuated that he didn't put 2 feet in to fulfilling the role that was necessary for him to take on this team. And, you know, I think it's important to note that, you know, before he chose to come here, you know, because he had the no trade clause, you know, he had to make a conscious decision about coming here. And I was talking to the 3-man about the potential of him coming here because PG and Russell were in communication with him. But I think he knew that it was going to be a big transition. And I give him an enormous amount of credit for the fact that he put both feet in. I personally think he did an excellent job in his first year transitioning his game, you know, working to becoming more of a off-the-ball player, being more reliant on other people to generate his offense, and sacrificing a lot. Now, at the same time, I think every player is entitled to take a step back after the season reflect on the year they had, and in his case, have to make a determination about whether or not this is a role that he wants to continue to be, functioning in. I actually think he's being quite honest with us in that respect, and I respect it very much. I think it's incumbent on us as an organization to show the same respect and be honest and transparent and straight with him about what that might look like going forward. And all that stuff, when you're a team like us that's handled a lot of different, I would say different situations we've packed a lot into 10 years. I think you learn to carry these things a little bit. And for us, that's going to be a form of dialogue. We'll sit down face to face and try to get an understanding of what's important to him, what's important to us, and we just got to make sure that we're on the same page going forward. And that'll happen. We have a long time before that takes place. But I really think it's important, and it's important. I certainly don't want to shape the conversation in any way to make it seem as if he wasn't a total pro or wasn't really trying to embrace this role during the season. As I said before, at the end of the day, he was a starter. When healthy, that starting lineup was the best starting lineup in the entire league. When healthy, actually, for not even when healthy, even with the injuries, we finished with the 7th best offense and the 9th best defense in the league, and he's a part of that. By the same token, the team as a whole struggled in the playoffs, and we all have to own that. That's a universal ownership. I don't think that. We can take the 6 games in the postseason and apply that to the 82, because we were exceptional on a lot of nights, normally against the best teams in the league, and we really struggled with consistency in a lot of the other nights. But that's a team issue. I guess the last thing I'd add, just with respect to next season and the way we feel about that. The opportunity to potentially have Westbrook, Paul George, and Steven Adams, all 3 of those players in their prime years with playoff experience, and the fit of those guys, both as competitors but also as players, is extremely, extremely exciting for us. That's what I think every team in the league is working towards, is to find players, two-way players, that have size for their positions, and that have accumulated postseason experience and that are in their prime. So that's number one. That for us is an extraordinarily unique opportunity, especially coming off of where we've been. I also think that we look at the team and we see the addition of Andre. We're not imagining or creating in our mind what the team might look like with Dre. We know what that looks like. We know the impact that he's had. We have a decent amount of data that tells us that, both from our eyes and also, objectively, and we're excited about that. I also think there's a lot of room and growth for Abrinas. There's a lot of room and growth for Patterson. I think he's a guy that we can certainly get more from, and that's something we have to look to going forward. And then Ferguson, I think, showed us some glimpses, and we think he's a really nice young player and the type of player that over time we've had success developing. Jeremy Grant, you guys will be, asking me about him, but we take a lot of pride in his development. The fact that when we got him from Philadelphia, he wasn't playing, and Jeremy's such a great kid. The way he put the work in, and he's progressed a little bit at a time, and now he's become a pretty effective backup 5 for us. With some unique skills. So really excited if we're able to bring him back to the team. But the continuity of the team is probably going to be our best friend, given the fact that historically these teams, generally in year one are, if you're fortunate, they're pretty good. I mean, last year we were about a 0 net rating. With this particular team, even without Dre for a large portion of the season, we made a jump to 3+. The only other playoff teams that took jumps like that from last year to this year are Toronto and Houston. We feel really good about the position we're in to capitalize on what we establish. But again, I just want to make it very clear, based on the history of the Thunder and the way that we have conducted ourselves and performed over time. Some teams are better than others. Some teams perform and exceed. Some teams meet. In this case, we have to own the fact that I don't think we capitalized on some of the opportunity that we had this season. Now, it's our job to keep moving forward, to identify it, and not just identify issues, but bring solutions. And I'm confident that we're going to do that because that's what we've done for 10 years. And we compete. That's what we do here. We stand in the arena and we compete. We find ways to get better. We have to own the fact that for our standards, 48 wins, a home court advantage, and 7th best night rating for this particular team, we felt like that wasn't where we wanted to be. At the same time, we're pretty confident, and I'm confident in the people that we have, that we'll be able to continue to be better and find ways to improve. So we're unhappy. We're not pleased with where we're at, but part of competing, part of being with the organization and the Thunder is being realistic, but also optimistic about your ability to impact change. And that's how we feel, and that's the approach we're taking to the off season. I'm happy to take any questions.
Sam, ultimately, what gives you the confidence that whether or not you can build this continuity, that Billy is the guy to coach it?
When we hired Billy, if you go back and look at the press conference that we held at that point in time, we talked about 3 different buckets that we identified as being what we wanted in a head coach. The first was a basketball coach that could adapt, evolve, and that had shown the ability tactically to play several different ways with different types of personnel, big, small, system, the different adaptations to changing game and changing personnel. I wish I could say I was as prophetic to know that we would be having the amount of changes that we have had or had to have had. And, that's in some ways it's great, in some ways it's unfortunate because continuity has always been a very big part of any team's success in the NBA, and we've struggled to grasp that over the last 3 years, some within our control and some out of our control. But Billy's ability to do that was a big factor. The second bucket was organizational alignment, the ability for somebody to get behind the values of the organization, to understand the vision of the Thunder and the work and what it means to Oklahoma, and really connect with that. And then the last thing was the qualities of high potential individuals. So curiosity, adaptability, humility, work capacity. Those are the things that and resilience. Those are the things that we really felt like were important. Now, for those of you that cover the team on a daily basis and are around Billy every day, I feel confident that, with respect to his qualities as a human being and as a worker, I think you see that every single day. I think that his adaptability as a coach has been recognized by the fact that, in his first year from college to the NBA, he had us within 2 minutes of going to the finals, and unfortunately that didn't work out. And then, as I said earlier, he's had several different teams. So it's those 3 things, in concert together, as well as the fact that he has an intense passion for the team and for the organization. And I think he comes in, guns blazing every day, looking for ways to get better, looking for ways to continue to build relationships with his players. And I think he's done an excellent job with that as well, based on just the fact that, this season with some of the adversities we faced, both relative to expectations, relative to some injury, the newness of the team, the chemistry of the team was the strength of the team. And I think he has a big hand in that as well.
Sam, you might have addressed this. I'm sorry I was late, first of all. You might have addressed this first thing off the rip, but it sounds like Billy's coming back. I just want to confirm with you just to be sure. Billy is coming back next season, right?
Yeah, I mean, just based on the way I'm talking about him, yes. Right. But yes.
Those a lot of words.
But that's all right.
I didn't hear yes or no.
That's right. No, context is important, but yes.
Sam, if Paul leaves, do you have a plan B, and where do you go from there?
Sure. Well, what I would say to you is that, one, let's live in the present. I understand that A lot of people, and this is more of a human nature thing, in my opinion, Barry. A lot of people will say, okay, well, we've heard this before, or, this has happened in the past. And I think it's just natural for people to take instances and apply those to other people. Okay, the difference here is that people are different. Human beings are different. What's right for one person may not be right for the other. The fact that Russell signed for 5 years, is a significant thing for us. He's the last person to make a significant decision for this organization. I think naturally, and I think some of you guys sitting in the seats probably had your mind going to somebody else. The reality is that each one of these decisions is singular and different, and every single person's different. So we have to wait to see what Paul does. I can sit here and tell you that to this point, the conversation we've had throughout the year, February, March, April, has been transparent, truthful, honest, and I believe in people, and I believe in letting the process play out before we make any rash decisions. I also think that us well enough, and we'll be prepared for everything. At the end of the day, we'll be prepared for all the different directions that could potentially go. The opportunity to trade for PG has elevated us. We were sitting here last year at the end of the year, and I think there was a lot of questions about, okay, that was fun, but Westbrook's in his prime, and how are we going to maximize that? And I agreed with you. Now, I didn't know exactly at that point what the solution to that would be, but we understood that. We were a 0 net rating team, and keeping that team together, although I really liked it, just wasn't aligned with where Russell was in his career, quite frankly. And small footnote, he was going to be a free agent. So, we also had to take that into account. The team that we have now, albeit disappointing with respect to expectations coming into the season, is much further along to where we ultimately want to be within Russell's best years and Paul's best years, quite frankly, because they're so aligned from an age standpoint, and with Steven now accumulating the amount of experience that he's accumulated. I think Paul used the terms year one. Yes, in year one, for us to jump to where we are now, understanding that, yes, I wish we were still playing. Part of me feels like we really had the capacity to still be playing, but we're not. But we also have to understand that we're in a very good position if PG does return to continue to build on the foundation of Paul George, Steven Adams, Russell Westbrook, and then also the surrounding cast we like as well. Our issues are in the controllable areas, and those are fundamental things that I think that we have to address. But I don't think if that team comes back together, I don't think with the addition of Drake, I don't think we're addressing whether or not we can match up with the best teams in the league. We demonstrated that. We have to be able to establish a standard of play day in and day out, regardless of where we're playing or who we're playing or when we're playing, and be able to rely on that. If we do that, I believe that we have a chance to be a special team. But that's on us to do.
Sam, is it your belief that if Melo is here, he has to be in the same role he was this past year? Because he kind of indicated that he couldn't do what you guys were asking him to do.
Well, this is what I would say. I'm going to reiterate one thing because it's important to me. His comments at the end of the year are not reflective of his approach during the year, because this is the NBA of 2018, and you guys would probably know that was not the case. You guys know pretty much everything. So he put both feet into that. He has to decide whether or not he wants to do another year of trying to make this transition as a stretch player. That's the first thing, and I think he's being very candid and very honest. I respect that. I respect the fact that he's being open about that. Now, we have the same responsibility. We have to be candid and honest with him. But one of the things I really like about Carmelo is, he's a mature person. You can talk to him. He listens. He's been professional with us within the building. I'm sure there were nights he was frustrated because it's a big transition that he's trying to make or was trying to make this season. And we have to figure out, again, like, we don't know exactly how our team's going to look. What I can promise you is that, one, the method of this takes time because these are dialogues and conversations, and you got to be straight with people. You got to be honest with people. You got to tell them where you stand, because if he is back with the team, if he feels like this is something he wants to continue to do, we all just got to be on the same page. And that's just, I don't want to lead in any different direction. That's Carmelo is, was great for us this year in the role he was playing. Made more threes than he's ever made in his career. Changed his shot distribution. Lowest turnover year. And as I said before, that lineup was the best starting lineup in the league. But we also don't know what our team's going to look like. So once that stuff starts to clarify, we can have some more detailed conversation. We'll do some listening. We also owe some what's the right word, information, I guess, as well. And we're looking forward to doing that. It's the best I can answer right now because there's so much time.
If he doesn't want to make that adjustment, he has a $27 million plus player option. That's his choice. What then becomes the ultimate solution for you guys? What direction would you have to go?
Well, I think the first thing is that dialogue has to happen with respect to kind of like where he is in his career, what he sees, relative to the role that's here, whatever that is, and what he wants out of that. I think it's, again, like, I understand the question. Before we can get to the finance component, to me, you got to get to just kind of like the open communication, transparency of communication. And that's one of the things that I don't know that everyone here, and it's not anyone's fault. You just don't know how those things happen. Like you have relationships with players, you have relationships with agents. You sit down, you work through these things. You have to do a lot of listening. You have to do a lot of asking questions, and vice versa. And then that stuff, the stuff you're talking about, the decision on the option, role, those types of things, those things work themselves out. And we'll sort it out. We'll figure it out. That's just always the way that we've operated.
How's Andre's rehab going, and at what point do you see him being 100%?
He's doing well. It's a tedious rehab. It's a frustrating rehab. But one of the things about Dre, I appreciate you asking that question, Cliff, because it gives me a chance to speak. I made the injury was a bit of an inflection point, and as I said before, there's no excuse for our inability to fundamentally adapt to that. I just don't want to. I don't want that Dre piece to come across like, well, if we had Dre, we saw what that would look like. Without Dre, we should be better, and found ways to get better. But without Dre, I think one of the things that we saw was, Dre is a what I would call like a fiber player. He brings in an immense amount of competitiveness. He does the stuff that most people don't want to do. Historically, people have opted to look at the things that maybe he doesn't do really well, like shoot the ball. But he was shooting 55%. Or he did shoot 55% for the year, this year, because he was taking shots that were, fastballs down the middle for him, and played really well off of the other starters, and really keyed our defense, got a lot of our transition going. We played in, I'll be guessing, I think within the 20s of about 20 maybe close games by definition. Offensively, our ratings were really good in under 2 minutes. Our breakdowns, and the reason why we came up short in a lot of our close games this year, was our defensive rating was not good enough in close games. We really struggled in close games defensively. And, that's a matter of a lot of different things. One, we fouled like it's nobody's business in those situations. You can probably have flashbacks about how many times in close games the other team's on the line. Down the stretch, I mean. And then, people shot the ball really well against us down the stretch in close games. And, some of that's on us and some of that's credit to them. But I think Dre makes a difference in those situations because He's the guy that comes up with the deflection. He's the guy that comes up with a defensive rebound. He's the guy that blows up a pick and roll. And when you've got him and Paul on the floor together at 6'8" plus, both of them, it's a problem. It's a problem, and the numbers bear that out. We're not like imagining that in our head. Like, we saw that, and once we got our feet underneath us after the gauntlet of change of the first 20. I mean, he had some possessions this year defensively that were like works of art. In fact, there was one in the Detroit game against Tobias Harris that was like a clinic, you know. And he's just got better and better. We miss him. There's no question. With that said, sometimes you're going to have injuries, and sometimes it'll be season-ending, and we have to fundamentally adjust for that as a unit, and we weren't able to do that.
Sam, when you traded for Paul, obviously, you guys have paid a lot for tax before, including this year, all that stuff. But when you're closer to the repeater tax, if you pay next year, does the result of this season have any effect on how much luxury tax you pay, or if Paul does hypothetically leave, does that affect how willing the organization is to pay the tax?
Well, okay, a couple things on that, Fred. And I'm glad you asked the question. I think it's an important question. The only way that our team becomes a really expensive team is if Paul George chooses to stay with the Thunder. So if you're asking me if we would like to keep Paul George, if he wants to keep his talents in Oklahoma City at the cost that it takes to re-sign him, the answer to that would be affirmative. Yes. Because Paul George is a very unique player. So that's how our team gets extremely expensive. The other way I think you have to look at that is over the course of a 10-year period. Over the course of 10 years, our team has had about the 12th or 13th highest payroll in the league. So we're in the top half. Teams around us in terms of total dollars over that 10-year period of time, San Antonio, Orlando, the Clippers, are kind of in that bookending us. We're about $6 million less than San Antonio in total payment over 10 years. With respect to efficiency of that spending or wins per percentage of the cap that's spent, we're in the top three. So San Antonio, Houston, Oklahoma City are, you know, with respect to like efficiency of the winning versus the percentage of the cap you're using, we're in the top three. So I'd like to think over those that 10-year period of time, you know, we've been in the middle of the pack, you know, with respect to payroll, and we are in one of the smallest markets in the league. But I think we've also been economical in that spending. Now, you also have cycles of your team. Russell Westbrook is in the prime of his career, and the opportunity to extend what has been a 10-year you know, run to further that is and potentially could come at a great cost. But that cost is not a cost that's going to be going in perpetuity. It could be a one-year significant spend in order to retain a player like George in the best years of Westbrook's career. And it's also not historically something that we've been doing. So you kind of come to these points in time, and the alternative would be to you know, rebuild the team and go in a different direction. On the heels of the 16 free agency, we had that choice. We chose to keep competing. We chose to keep going to see if we could find a way to stay at an elite level. I understand. We're disappointed. The year did not go to the level that we want. But the foundation that we have and the ability to keep a player like Paul George, given the fact that we're, you know, 11 or 12 over the course of 10 years, it could take that for a year in order to continue the 10-year run. And it hasn't been something we've been doing for a long time. So the answer is that's how we get expensive. And the other part of your question was, does the performance of this particular year's team, again, I don't know that you can really look at it that way, only for this reason. I don't think that's a reflection on whether or not Paul George is a good player. Russell Westbrook is a good player, and Steven Adams is a good player in terms of foundationally. And I also don't think that we really saw the full team because, one, of the lack of continuity, that empirically teams take bumps with regard to their net just by keeping the group together. We went from a 0 to a 3. We can expect, based on history, a little bit of a bump there. Factor in Robertson, a little bit of a bump there. I think we'll be a better team. I also think that continuity-wise for Billy, I think there's a lot of things that line up to say, you know, you should probably run this back and give it an opportunity. And, you know, from there, then you might have to make some tough decisions. But I don't think it's a tough decision if Paul George wants to stay with the Thunder, given the fact of how he fits with our core.
Considering you have Russell locked up in the next few years, I mean, he's had multiple roles as a leader, you know, going back to Kevin Durant being here, the MVP season last year, now this year. If Paul George is able to return, how pivotal do you think this offseason is in terms of his development as a leader with the team? Or, and I don't want you to think I'm trying to say, like, what conversations would you have to alter his game, but are there ways that you feel he can still improve going into this 11th season?
Yeah, so you mean more like game-oriented? Yeah, okay. Just to make sure I understand the question. Yeah, so listen, one thing I can tell you about Westbrook is he's driven, okay? He's going to keep coming. He's not going to, you know, kick his feet up and expect to come back next year and have things just all of a sudden be a little bit different. I think he's going to, based on every competitor, I think he's going to spend, now whether he'll tell you this or not, he's going to spend a lot of time thinking about the things he can do to get better. And, you know, for our team, one of the things that I think he's focused on trying to do is become a better three-point shooter. And I see him late at night in this gym working on that. You know, his ability to continue to catch and shoot and knock shots down, I think, is a big part of his continued evolution as a player. With all that being said, you're talking about a guy that is amongst the best players, if not the best players in the league. It would be easy for him to kind of rely on what he's done, but he's not going to do that. The areas for him to continue to improve, those are things that, one, you know, structurally, how can we continue to find ways to put him in position to be enhance his effectiveness? You know, I wouldn't say make him effective because he's highly, highly effective. You know, one thing about him is over the last 10 years, we have the second most total wins of any team in the league, including the playoffs, other than San Antonio, and Russell's been here for all of that. He's not perfect. He'll tell you that. I think, you know, shooting the ball at the free throw line this year, what we experienced, and we were 29th in the league shooting the free throw. How in the world you can be that bad at the free throw line and still end up 7th in offensive efficiency is beyond me. But we've had guys underperform shooting the ball from places on the floor that they've notoriously shot the ball well from. So Ferguson, we're feeling out. You know what I mean? We don't know. But, you know, a lot of other guys didn't have the year shooting the ball that they normally would or have, and we have to figure out, you know, how much of that's random and how much of that is systematic that we can do to help. But, you know, Patterson, high 30s3-point shooter. Abrinas, high 30s 3-point shooter. PG was, I think, running close to 40. Melo was in the 37 area. Felton had a 35-plus 3-point shooting year. You know, Dre, obviously, that's not the strength of his game, but he was efficient from the spots on the floor. Stevens always going to be up there, you know, in the area in which he shoots the ball, and Russell's just devastating from at the rim and mid-range. I think everybody can come back a little bit better, and I think Russell will do the same. There's no question. But the free throw line will help us all. I mean, that's one of those fundamental areas that, you know, I wish I had an answer for you, but we had guys not shoot free throws well collectively, and we were leaving 5-6 points a game on the line and losing. We lost a lot of close games, and again, that's a reality. It's not an excuse. Like, we have to be better at the line. We have to knock shots down at the line, and we're not imagining guys to shoot better at the free throw line. They've done that for a long period of time. It just didn't happen. Wow, that was a lot. There was people jumping in there. We'll get to all of you. Like,
you talked about Russell not kicking his feet up or just expecting things to be different. How do you get more out of him defensively? I know we're already asking a lot of him in terms of the offensive ability to carry it, but can just hasn't been a consistent defender?
I think that's a fair question. I think that's something that, again, for us to be where we were defensively with Dre, which is, I think, 1 or 2 in the league, uniformly, the group as a whole, I think we can get more out of defensively. And that's saying something because we're 9th in the league defensively. And so, but with our team, with Westbrook, Paul George, Robertson, and Adams, and obviously, that's Carmelo on that team is not going to be the best defender of that group. But I do think that when Robertson dropped out of that group, it made everybody else's job harder, and I don't think we really adapted to that effectively. And that's everybody. I wouldn't say it's just Russell. But, I don't think that a lot of times we think about defense and we think about it being this we think about the glamour of defense. You know what I mean? We think about Dre pinning a ball on the backboard, or Russell, running through a pass and taking it, like a pick six to the other end of the floor, But the best defenses are the ones that force the most inefficient shots, and we as a unit didn't do a great job of that. Now we turned people over at an alarming rate. We defensive rebounded okay. But we knew that would be a bit of an adjustment for us because we got a smaller team this year because we were playing with more space, and we're trying to add more shooting with Patterson, et cetera. And we were hurt a little bit on the boards, but we were good enough. We got better in the deep paint, but that's a universal approach. Now, I also think that speaks to the continuity, which is if we were able to, and this is without Dre, but if we're able to bring the same group back, that's where role definition, the anticipation, especially with all the switching schemes that we're using, that Billy likes to use, there's a rhythm to that, and there's a repetition to that I do think can get better. If you look at the best teams defensively, a lot of them do have a lot of continuity. And there's a cerebral nature to defense as much as there is to offense, and I think that uniformly that could be better. I don't disagree. A lot of teams would be happy to be in the top 10 defensively. We would like to be better than it. We'd like to be in the top 5 if we could, and that's what we're going to try to focus on.
What did you think of what Oladipo and Sabonis were able to do in Indiana this season?
I honestly wasn't drastically surprised because we gave Victor that contract. A lot of people made fun of us when we did that, but and we also traded a significant player to get DeMontis. I couldn't be happier for those guys. What those guys are doing is doesn't have a reflection on what our eye on the ball is, what's happening here, and putting ourselves in position to be closer to our goal. Last year we were a 0 net rating team based on the composition of that team, just on the fit. It's not because of those players. I mean, you can see that. Those guys, and I don't want to get in trouble, those guys should stay in Indiana the rest of their careers. They're great players, great guys, hard workers, and we wish them nothing but the best. We want players that are from Oklahoma to go on and have success other players. This isn't like we're not like 5-year-olds. Rooting against people because this is a business. You want people to know that you generally have a good feel for players, so that when they come to make deals with you, they feel like they're going to get somebody that's going to perform well. We have a certain style of play. Indiana's a certain style of play. I think the fit for Victor specifically is fantastic. I also think Victor is he's a great competitor. So is Domas. We want those guys to do great. Everybody that leaves here. Listen, I'm proud of the fact that a player like Taj was here. I mean, he wasn't here for very long, but Gibson is back with Tibbs. He should stay there in Minnesota for a long time. But another great, I'm proud that Gibson was here. He's a competitor. But we want those guys to do well, and they should do well in those places because those places fit them exceptionally well. We're also really happy with the position we're in relative to kind of, you know, the situation we were faced with last year coming into Russell's free agency, you know, the age of the team relative to his age, and quite frankly, just the upside of what a player like Paul George can mean to our franchise and our community.
When Westbrook and Durant were going through their career, they both have been in the program or the franchise a long time. Paul's been here a year. How do you handle things in terms of selling points or whatever when you talk to him compared to those two guys and just when this conversation started?
Well, Myron, you're hitting on something that I think is pretty important, which is that's the reason we traded for Paul George, because we weren't going to have access to a player like that in any other way, especially not at that age or with the type of fit next to our core players, meaning Westbrook and Adams. It just, you can't get access to those players. Now, there's a significant amount of risk that comes with that, but with where we are in the juncture of our timeline as an organization and where we were with Russell at that point in time, you're going to have to get comfortable with that. I mean, we talked about that at the time. We also think that although it was a disappointing year, in our first year together, there were some really positive things that took place. Wasn't enough. We feel like maybe should be a little bit better, but the foundation, you know, is certainly in an optimistic framework. But we traded for him because we get to be around him. We get to build a relationship with him. We get to build a relationship with his representation. We get to answer questions. And you get to have dialogue. And as I said before, you know, we're able to talk about those things openly. If you're fortunate enough to get an hour-long free agent meeting, it's not going to be here. It's not going to be in front of our fans. It's not going to be, you know, in the environment. I personally think this is a wonderful environment to play basketball as a professional athlete. A big part of it is the universal and unwavering support that our fans provide the team. I think it's a great quality of life. I think that, you know, we're resourced exceptionally well by ownership to provide the players an environment to amplify their talents. And I'd like to show that to anybody. But I think what we've learned over time is you just have to be yourself. That is probably the most important thing. And the best way to be yourself is, I also think, when you go through some adversity, you learn a lot about people. And when things weren't going the way that we wanted them to go this season, especially the first 20 games, because that was a rough melding or molding, which we kind of expected, but it was tough because we weren't making even shots that were open. Everyone just kept plugging. Everyone just kept coming, kept competing, kept working together. The intention was good. The brotherhood was being built. The coaching staff and the players were working together, trying to sort it out, and PG was a huge part of that. He was a huge part of that because he was interacting, and I think that by the end of the season, the dialogue between him and Billy and Russell and Carmelo, Steven was growing, and that doesn't happen unless he's here, and I think you just have to go through things. And sometimes it's not just the wins in Golden State or the wins in Toronto or the wins in Houston. Sometimes it's the tough stuff too, like a tough flight back from Salt Lake City in a series that you feel like, you know, we could have performed a little bit better. Now, how do you respond to that? You know, how do you dictate what happens next? Like that has to happen collectively, but I think PG is a big part of that.
Sam, you had an opportunity to choose between Jeremy being restricted last summer versus unrestricted this year. How do you feel about that decision now in hindsight, and where do you stand with him coming up on this summer?
Well, I mean, with respect to that, I mean, I don't know how much I can say on it other than you have to have two people have to cooperate with respect to an extension, right? And you didn't mention the fact that he's potentially extension eligible. With respect to restricted free agency, you just don't know what the market could potentially be. We didn't know what was coming at us. We knew that we were going to have an expensive team. Sometimes people forget that Carmelo's deal is roughly was basically the equivalent of McDermott and Cantor. What we saw there was a chance for Carmelo to start and play as a stretch player next to these other players. And Doug and Ennis, based on their time here, were more situational players for us. And we had a hard time sometimes. It's when you have Steven Adams, the backup five can sometimes, suffer. Now, Jeremy, fortunately, can play a couple different positions, so that's helped him a great deal. We knew that we were going to check in pretty high anyway. Adding more to that, at that point in time, could have been preventative to other things. And we still have the opportunity to use bird rights at the appropriate time to have conversations with Jeremy. He also is, one of those players that is extension eligible. And at the end of the day, we'll have those conversations, and we're excited about his development. We hope he's excited about his development and the track he's on. But it's a marketplace, and you have to see where that goes.
You said you wouldn't have access to a player like Paul George via any other way than trade. So when you reach out to agents, players, free agents, what are the biggest objections you?
That's not really the context of the comment. Essentially, it's respect to team building. So you only have so much space available. When you have a player like Westbrook or Adams, that's going to take up a significant amount of that space. Those players are generally drafted, and they're generally drafted toward the top, but there's also the occasion in which a player can get picked out of a needle in a haystack and get picked, somewhere else within the draft. But generally, higher draft picks have the higher projection to become those types of players. We weren't in the position to be in that race. We had a team that wasn't declining itself and opening up salary cap space, because we won 47 games last year on the heels of free agency. Now, we could have pulled the cord at that point and gone a different direction. Some teams would have done that, and that would have opened up plenty of space. But with that, you need to have elite players to attract other elite players in today's NBA. So for us, it became more of a trade conversation in order to get a player like that. And in order to do that, you have to give up good players to do that. So it's more systemic in terms of how can you add those types of pieces to your team based on where the timeline of your team is. We're still working off the canvas of 2008. Like, we arrived here and we haven't turned the page because we haven't rebuilt the team since 2008. And I'm happy about that. At the same time, we're trying to make it work, as long as we can. But ultimately, us, like every other team, is going to have to find ourselves in a position where we'll have to rebuild. The ability to get Paul George prior to Russell's contract opportunity, I think, was the best way for us to have a chance to continue to stay on that track and not take a different turn. Because I think the fans in Oklahoma City have been so great, so supportive. We want to try to keep an elite team on the floor as long as we can. And as Fred asked earlier, that could come with a big expense. But unfortunately for us, that expense hasn't been longitudinal, and it's certainly not permanent. But that's where we're at after 10 years, hopefully going on 11.
Does Carmelo's status at all have anything tied to what Paul does, stay or go?
I don't know the answer to that. I think all the guys have great relationships. As I said earlier, I don't think you make it through a year that was as up and down as ours this season without really good chemistry, without the coaching staff keeping the group focused. And I don't want to speak to the relationships of the guys because they all have their personal relationships and their playing relationships. You don't have to, not everybody has to hold hands and go to dinner every night to have great chemistry. And there's guys that could have a hard time with each other on the floor that are best friends off the floor. So, I don't know the status of that, other than my experience is generally that players want other players to do what, is best for them. in Melo's case, Carmelo's case, you know, as I said earlier, he's simply being honest about whether or not he feels like he can commit another year to playing this role. I appreciate the candor. I respect it. You know, and those are the conversations we have to have, and there'll be a method to that, and we'll sort it out. You know, he's a pro. He's been nothing but a pro since he's been here. I don't know what effect that has on other people, but we'll all work together. I mean, that's one of the things about us that we've tried to continue to foster, which is just like, let's work through these things. It's pro sports. It's in a cauldron of people focusing on every word and every tweet and all that stuff. I think at the end of the day, you got to reduce it down to just human beings trying to understand what everyone's trying to accomplish and see if we can bring ourselves all together to do that. I personally really like the foundation that we have on a human level. Like I do. I think that the group is really connected. We've got to get ourselves stronger in the controllable areas and the consistent areas. We own that. With that being said, we're going to do what we always do here in Oklahoma City. We're going to take where we are, and we're going to compete. We're going to keep coming. We're going to keep our eye on the ball and figure out the ways we can get better. And we're going to keep standing up and finding ways that we can take this group and get it to another level. And that's collective. That's everybody. That's from myself to every single person that's in the building.
You hear that comment yesterday about PG's made up his mind. What's your reaction to that?
I talked to PG, and I would say, why don't we listen to Paul? He's said has had a lot of comments also. I'm not trying to dissuade anybody or say that what someone says someone told them is inaccurate. I don't, but I'd just rather listen to the man himself. I'd also reflect on the fact that like PG really keeps his business like pretty in-house. I mean, we've gone through the whole year. We haven't heard like a whole lot of stuff since he's been here. He's been pretty straight down the middle, and I have nothing. I can't do anything but trust the things that I'm being told, and I do, because you know, if you can't do that, when I say trust, I mean trust the fact that he said positive things about the organization. If you can't trust other people, or if you're going to live in a world of skepticism and cynicism, I can't help you. I don't know where that leaves us. You know, good luck. I'll see you down the line. I'm not going to let myself go there.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I mean, we had that conversation. I mean, he's free. He was really good for us. But it's like free agency. You just, once the gun goes off, you just have no idea. Same thing with the other guys, you know. So we wanted him for a long time because he kicked our ass in Dallas for a long time. So, but yeah, he's a big part of the heartbeat of the team, chemistry of the team, like we were talking about. And it's funny. I know the press conference is over. It's funny because it's been a great learning for me to watch, because our teams have generally been like, we've returned about 80% of our minutes